Welcome to the online course Essentials of Youth Policy, organised by the partnership between the European Commission and the Council of Europe in the field of youth.
My name is Finn Denstad. I've been involved in the youth sector for, well, I almost said almost as long as I can remember, but that's not completely true. But I started becoming involved in the youth sector back in the mid-90s when I started working for the National Youth Council in Norway. So I've worked on youth policy since then, both in Norway and in the European Commission, and also working with the OECE in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And I'm also the author of the Youth Policy Manual. It's mostly about reflecting upon what you want to do before you do it and develop a good plan for doing it. And that is always important for anything that you would like to do, I think. And reflecting upon doing a youth policy strategy, or the reason why a youth policy strategy is important, is several things. One is that it helps you reflect upon who should be involved in the process, both young people themselves, NGOs, but also which government authorities shall be involved in it. It helps you reflect upon how to develop cross-sectoral strategy. It helps you draw on the resources that are available. By doing research on youth policy for making a strategy, you also become more aware of who else has done it before. All of these things are very important for developing a good youth strategy. Also think about how, not only what youth policy is, but also how you will develop the strategy and how you can involve the various stakeholders. It's a sector which is very much driven by young people and youth NGOs, and they are often taking the lead, while the government is sometimes being a bit on the back burner and waiting for young people to tell them what they need to do. Mm-hmm. And I think when you want to develop a youth policy strategy, it's important to think of government ownership. Young people cannot be responsible for conducting the youth strategy themselves. You need to have a responsible government authority that can take the lead from the side of the government in developing a youth strategy. And in addition to that, you need to have the right resources. Mm-hmm. I've seen excellent strategies on paper, but they are completely worthless because they cannot be implemented. Mm-hmm. Simply because there's no government ownership, or not sufficient government ownership to the process, and there are no resources allocated from the side of the government to implement the strategy. Mm-hmm. And when you don't have those two very core elements, a youth policy strategy is more or less an experiment that never takes off. It's a plane that never lifts off. Mm-hmm. So you need to have those core elements in order to be successful. I think I would maybe rephrase that question to say, from a young person's perspective, how can I be as successful as possible in lobbying the government mm-hmm. for developing a good youth policy strategy? Mm-hmm. It's extremely important to be very concrete. It's not sufficient to just mention or to repeat the same mantra over and over again, that young people are a resource, we need to be involved in decision making. But you need to be more concrete. What do you mean about young people are a resource? What do you mean about taking part in decision-making processes? You need to think and reflect upon, okay, what are the different elements of a youth policy that are important for me, as a young person, and why? How can I present my arguments best to the decision makers? And linked to that is also, be realistic. As a young person, you want the world, you really want to change the world. You might want to take over decision making on behalf of or from the government. You think maybe young people should be in the driver's seat when it comes to these things. But be realistic. The government has the responsibility to implement youth policy, and you don't want to release the government from that responsibility. So you want the government to be in charge, but you also want to be heard.
We hope this video contributed to your learning about youth policy.